Brilliance Audio presents On Far Malayan Shores by Tara Haigh, translated by Joseph Vandervoort, performed by Angela Daw. Ordinarily, Ella was happy to undertake the 40-minute walk to work from her home on leafy Harvesterhudeveg, especially when she had the early morning shift. The fresh air did her good, and the stiff breeze that so often blew through Hamburg could put a spring in even the weariest step. But when the weather was very bad, walking was out of the question, and today the rain was lashing down in buckets. Mother had telephoned for a cab immediately after breakfast. That came with rather awkward consequences, since a 21-year-old daughter of a humble sailor and a schoolteacher who could afford to be driven to work in a carriage represented an object of curiosity to onlookers, to put it mildly. This morning, to avoid further inflaming the smoldering resentment of the doctors, and especially the attendants, Ella once again instructed the driver not to drop her off in front of the main entrance to the Neues Allgemeines Krankenhaus, the new general hospital. As a rule, she dismounted on the other side of the road, or down one of the side streets, as Father had advised her to do after one of Ella's colleagues had recently been unable to resist asking her how she could afford a carriage ride from the 200 marks that a young female hospital attendant earned each month. "I can't really afford it, but I would have arrived late otherwise." This was not an excuse that Ella could use very often, of course. Other excuses had followed, until the constant need to come up with a new story on the way to work every time it rained had become a source of distress to her. Rumors were already circulating among the doctors about her place of residence, as well as the fact that her family had a telephone. It was unheard of for people of humble origins to live in an exclusive quarter on the banks of the Ulster, surrounded by wealthy business people and industrialists. That was a privilege not even the hospital directors could afford. Once again, it was her father who had advised her to say that her family was living with relatives in an apartment building. Nobody had made any further inquiries since then, thank heavens. The 15-minute cab ride along the Ulster and across the city wasn't long enough to come to a decision. Should she continue to exercise discretion and be soaked to the skin? Or should she risk being dropped off directly in front of the entrance to the hospital? The portico of the enormous red-brick building was already in view. Through the rain-spattered window, Ella could just make out one of the other attendants entering the building. She was a little early today. Most of her colleagues usually arrived later. She decided to take a chance and revise her previous instructions to the coachman. "Please stop here, by the entrance," she called to him. He slowed down. Ella instantly regretted her decision, for at that precise moment, a woman approached holding an umbrella that was whipping back and forth in the wind. At this time in the morning, she was sure to be a colleague. Unfortunately, everybody knew everybody else at the hospital, even though there were 160 nurses working here across several separate pavilions. Ella hoped the attendant would be too busy trying to hold her umbrella up against the wind to even notice the carriage, or to examine the person getting out of it. She had already counted out her money before she dismounted, and after handing it to the coachman, she lowered her umbrella to conceal her face and danced around the puddles that lay between her and the steps leading up to the entrance. With any luck, her colleague would already be inside, but it was not to be. She had just mounted the top step and was within reach of the door handle when two spindly legs clad in woolen stockings and sturdy brown men's shoes came into view beneath her umbrella. Ella exhaled. She knew only one attendant who dressed so practically yet unflatteringly. "Good morning, Ella." The greeting came from the familiar voice of her colleague Matilda, the longest-serving attendant who had worked here since the pavilion opened 9 years ago. She knew about Ella's family situation and was as quiet as a grave. Matilda was in her mid-30s, had a very agreeable temperament, and always wore a smile on her lips. One might even say she was a friend, although right now she more closely resembled a drowned rat. The poor thing was soaked to the skin and was looking wistfully at the departing carriage. "I wish I had your luck," she added, but with a benevolent smile that Ella answered with a sigh and an innocent shrug. "Let's go inside," Matilda urged, understandably enough, although they had by now found shelter from the rain under the portico.